Call the meeting to order. Be sure and put your phones on vibrate or turn them off, please. Including myself. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to have the prayers going to be by Sammy and the pledges by Mark. If y'all will please stand.
Will you bow with me, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning and thank you for all of our many blessings. We ask especially today that you be with the people in Sutherland Springs as they're going through a lot of grief right now. We also want to thank you for our recent rains. We ask that you be with us this morning as we strive to conduct this meeting in a way that will honor you. We ask all these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really. Where'd they go?
I know it's like eye contact, it's like words.
Help me out.
So, okay.
All right, we're to the consent agenda. The commission may request for consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. We have the approval of the October 16th Planning Commission regular minutes. We have a preliminary plat to San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 2. We have the final plat of Block 2 and 3, San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 2, the final plat of Bentwood Country Club Estates, Section 40A, and the final plat of Bentwood Country Club Estates, Section 40B. Do I have a motion?
So made.
Have a motion? Sammy seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, we are rolling. Now to the regular agenda, the subdivision plats. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. The final plat of Western Hills Annex, Section 4.
Good morning, Hillary Bucher, Senior Planner. I'm here to present Western Hills Annex, Section 4, final plat. It's 0.386 acres, and it's up near the intersection of Junius and Hatcher, RS1, Neighborhood Future Land Use, SMD2, and Angelo Heights Edition. This is a fairly simple plat. They are using an unplatted parcel and dividing it into two residential lots. They are asking for a variance from Junius Street. The existing pavement is 36 wide in lieu of the 50-foot that's required. Staff's rationale for approval of this variance is the current street widths do not pose a safety risk. Most of the area is already platted. This is just a small unplatted parcel dividing it into two lots. If we did an irregular jog, it might be a safety issue, and granting this variance would not vary any other provisions of the ordinance. So staff's recommendation is approval of the final plat subject to 3 conditions of approval. In general, these are a copy of a certificate or certification of taxes paid from the appraisal district, improve Junius Street or obtain the ordinance, and then make the water and sewer connections. Also approving the variance from Chapter 10.3A2 of the subdivision ordinance to allow Junius Street, an urban minor collector street, to maintain a 36-foot width in lieu of a 50-foot. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? No, ma'am.
I do have a
Oh, you
question.
have a question? Okay.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. Yeah.
No.
Okay, so they're asking for a variance for the street width.
Correct?
And then what is the improvement on Junius Street or obtain the variance? On
All that
one right
means
there.
is if you do not approve this variance, then they will have to improve it. That's just the condition of approval. So if the
They'll have to
if the
widen it.
variance is
Okay.
granted, then we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, any public comment?
Morning, the Commission. Herb with SKG. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
No questions, thank you. Okay, any other public comment? There being none, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
Travis made the motion, Terry seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, 6-0. The replats of lots 1 and 2, Block 11, Fairview Edition.
Good morning, Commissioners. Christina Heredia, planner with the City of San Angelo. Today I'm going to talk about the replat of lots 1 and 2, Block 11 of the Fairview Edition. It is located on the southwest corner of the intersection of Archer and Bryan. It is single RS1 zoning, single member district number 3. So the current layout of the lots is a north-south orientation, and they are asking for a replat to do an east-west orientation, as you can see here. We are recommending approval of the replat. They have also requested one variance, and we are recommending approval of that as well. The variance is to improve the street width of South Archer. The first one, not to be detrimental to public safety. We think the current street width is adequate. There is a large right-of-way. As you can see here on the South Archer currently has a right-of-way of 80 feet and a paving width of 38 feet. There is space available to widen it, but the length of a widening would only be 1 foot, and so we don't think that that is sufficient and necessary. As we said, the existing street is already sufficient, and granting it will not vary any of the provisions. Sorry, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather today. So we are recommending approval of the replat plus approval of the partial variance to Chapter 10382. There are 6 conditions of approval. The first is to get the copy of certification, water sewer connections. Both new lots will have to have permitted approaches because as of right now there's only one. Number 4 is similar to the one earlier. Prepare and submit plans for improvements or receive a variance. Revise the plat to show the correct right-of-way of South Archer. Currently, the plat shows 50 feet, but South Archer is 80 feet. And there is a easement in the back right here that says sewer, but we would like it to say utility. If you need to, I can read those into the record.
No, we're good, thank you.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On this replat, these lots are irregular in size,
Yes.
so what's the maximum, do you guys know the maximum allowable improvements on that smaller lot? This is,
Well,
How big of a building could they build?
correct,
There is no maximum set forth in the zoning ordinance, only minimums.
okay,
and they do meet the minimum requirements.
minimum requirements, okay.
Yes, but our main thing is that because it says sewer, this is where they'd also get their water.
Yes,
Yes.
So that's why I wanted to say utility.
So I'm guessing, John has clarified and spoke Rebecca for me. He has suggested that by the time the setbacks are taken into account, can you fit the minimum building
yes, that's the
within that
question.
building envelope? And the
Yes.
answer is yes. Christina calculated that out beforehand
Okay.
to make sure that those minimums are met within the building setbacks.
sorry for, I didn't ask that question
all right. He
right,
often
but
has
thank
to
you,
translate
John,
for
for
me. I appreciate
helping.
that.
Are there
All
any
right.
other questions?
Any other questions? All right, public comment. Gonna be the Herb show today, it looks like.
For a little while. Be happy to answer any questions you might have on this. Actually, the minimum lot size is 50 by 100, and we're at 64 by 100. So
Okay, thank you.
We're good. Any other public comment? There being none, do I have a motion?
Move to approve as stated.
Okay, Mark made the motion. Second. Sammy seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. I'm not gonna jinx this, but we're moving right along. Okay. C, first replat of tracks 41 and 42, Red Creek subdivision.
Good morning. This is the first replat. There was an existing 2 lots here. It was 41 and 42. They are reconfiguring the lot lines in between them. The total is 8 acres. It's in the ETJ, and it's west of Bramlett Lane and Rust Road. So the proposed replat would create a flag lot. It would create an entrance off of Bramlett Lane. They are requesting variances on Bramlett Lane. They have 50-foot right-of-way in lieu of 60-foot, and they have 20-foot pavement in lieu of 30-foot and no sidewalks. The street widths, right away, and lack of sidewalk, this currently services the area. We are asking for an additional emergency services turnaround to help lessen the public safety risk. This is an existing platted neighborhood, so it would be hard to widen just this part. Like I said, the streets already function in this area, and granting these variances would not vary any other provisions. So staff recommends approval of the replat, subject to 3 conditions of approval. Copy of the tax certificate, improve Bramlett Lane or obtain the ordinance, and a drainage study if increased impervious area. The approval of the variance is an approval from Chapter 9, 3V, and Chapter 10, 3A1, and 10, 3A2 of the subdivision ordinance, conditional on the dedication of an unobstructed emergency vehicle turnaround easement on Bramlett Lane. So this would allow an emergency vehicle to be able to basically tee in there, back out, and turn around if they needed to. This is a longer cul-de-sac road, so this helps the emergency services get in and out of there quicker. Does anyone have any questions? We'll go back so you can see it.
Questions?
The emergency services turnaround is located up here, so they can turn in and back out.
Very good. All righty. Any public comment? You might as well just pull a chair up.
This one is a little bit different. We actually had a meeting with city staff, and as you know, Red Creek has numerous dead-end roadways of extreme length, and you can't really do anything about those. I mean, they don't have cul-de-sacs or anything, so this is kind of a compromise where we can actually take some action to help out with the turnaround, and we've got another one coming out on the first replat of track 181, and they're recommending the same type turnaround situation. We haven't gotten with the owner to whether they want to split a driveway to do the turnaround or just put it all in one lot, but essentially it'll be the same type turnaround configuration. That we're doing what we can, and we appreciate the city staff working with us on, you know, alleviating that problem without having to build a cul-de-sac or anything. But I could answer any questions.
Any questions for her? No, sir. Thank you. Any other public comment? There being none, to have a motion.
Move to approve.
Joe made the motion.
Second.
Terry seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Next, D. First replat of track 114 Red Creek subdivision.
This is another replat in the Red Creek subdivision. This one is a 10-acre parcel. It's still in the ETJ. It's 2 properties along Rust Road and 1 along North Valley Road, approximately 0.44 miles north of Bramlett and Rust. So we're pretty close to where we were previously. They are actually splitting this 10-acre piece into 2 parcels. They need it for a water tap. So the proposed variance is from Rust Road and North Valley Road, and it's for the pavement, 20-foot in lieu of the 30-foot pavement. We don't believe this is detrimental. These are existing streets. Again, a previously platted area where we're only asking for 1 lot. And we believe that they are sufficient as they are. The county has spoken that they agree with this situation. We recommend approval of the replat subject to 3 conditions of approval. Copy of the tax certificate, improve Rust Road and North Valley Road, or obtain the ordinance and a drainage study if the increased impervious area. This one does not have the emergency services turnaround. This one is both through streets. So approval of the variance from Chapter 10-3A2 of the subdivision ordinance to allow Rust Road and North Valley Road, rural local roads, to maintain 20-foot pavement in lieu of 30-foot.
Any questions? Nope. All right, public comment. All right, look at that. All right. Just checking. Okay, there being none, do I have a motion? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve is written.
Terry made the motion.
Second.
Mark seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Going down to E, first replat of track 181 Red Creek subdivision.
Okay, we're just going to stay in the Red Creek subdivision one more time. This is the first replat of a approximately 6-acre site in the ETJ, and this is east of O'Brien Lane and Swan Road. It's dividing a platted lot into 2 residential lots. They're asking for variances for for O'Brien Lane. It's a little confusion there, not Bramlett, but O'Brien. 50-foot right-of-way in lieu of the 60-foot, and 20-foot pavement in lieu of the 30-foot with no sidewalks. Again, these roads are existing, previously platted. We don't believe where we believe they're sufficient in size, and it would create an irregular jog. So staff is recommending approval of the replat, subject to 3 conditions: tax certificate, improve O'Brien Lane or obtain the variance, and a drainage study if the increased impervious area. This is another one that we are approving a variance from Chapter 9.3V, Chapter 10.3A1, and 10.3A2 of the subdivision ordinance, conditional on the dedication of an unobstructed emergency vehicle turnaround easement on O'Brien Lane.
Any questions?
Yes, I have one. There are 2 variances that it looks like we're talking about granting here. One is for right-of-way and the other one's for paving width.
Yes, sir. On this one, there is a right-of-way, paving width, and they don't want to put in sidewalks out there.
Okay.
And all of that is conditional upon their improvement of their emergency services turnaround.
The right-of-way does not really present a cost impact on the property owner, does it?
I don't know that
We don't really get into cost.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, can't talk cost.
well,
Why
They
wouldn't,
can.
I think what he's saying.
They
I
can.
think
There's
the
not an
weekend that
expense
there's
associated with
expense
granting
associated with it, so
that
why
right-of-way.
should we be granting the variance of the right of way? I think if I may speak for engineering, although engineering could probably say this way better than I can, it doesn't appear as if we need additional right of way, that
Okay.
we'll be improving this area, that it's gonna be in our plans to the ETJ. I think that because engineering services has looked at this, they have worked with the county, and we are
Okay.
working with the county and engineering services to revamp our ETJ perimeters.
Okay,
In this regard, we are all recommending
Everybody's
approval
happy.
of this.
that's perfect.
Okay.
That's what I wanted.
you wanna
Thank
talk
you.
Is that
plans?
okay? Okay.
One thing that we also look at is in the
Go ahead
ETJ,
and
Lance
say your name.
Overstreet Engineering Services. One thing also too, in the ETJ area, there's supposed to be a 60-foot right-of-way.
Yes.
Within the city, it would be a 50-foot right-of-way. If we were to, at some point, expand into that area, we can still put a 40-foot road and a 50-foot right-of-way. The
Okay.
likelihood that we're going to expand at that rate into that area is pretty low, especially within any, frequent time frame.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we've also been looking at is other lots that may already be platted that don't have the additional right-of-way. And so in this particular instance, it doesn't make sense to have one lot with a little bit of right-of-way in an area that most likely is not gonna get expanded into. And so,
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Public comment.
And Herb with SKG again, get this done and we'll be out of Red Creek. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, there being none, do I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Travis made the motion.
Sammy second.
Sammy seconded it. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right. And thank you to the city, the engineers, the owners, and everybody for making that very easy on us. All right, we're going to go to conditional uses. The planning commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the city council. The first one's going to be CU 1714 Concho Quarters.
Morning, Planning Commissioners. Jeff Fisher, Senior Planner. Conditional use 1714 Concho Quarters. This is for a short-term rental. Requires a conditional use in the RS2 zone. It's on 0.34 acres southwest of West Avenue A and South Randolph Street on Harry Thomas's District Number 3 in the Concho neighborhood. You can see the lots were platted, so it's 2.5 lots in this area here. The future land use on the property is downtown. It's just inside the downtown area. And as mentioned, the zoning is 2-family residential RS2. Here's a site plan that lays out what the applicant's doing. So you've got 3 buildings on the properties right now. The proposed short-term rental, and they have an existing short-term rental. They've been paying hotel tax prior to the ordinance, so they're grandfathered in if they get this conditional use, is at 305. That's that building right here. The existing dwelling, which the applicants are here after if you have any questions, are thinking of possibly renting that out for more than 30 days, so just be a rental, or they may stay in that building. So that remains a single-family dwelling. And you have an existing carport in the back that has 2 parking spaces, as well as an accessory structure. My understanding is there's no stove in there, so Basically, you've got two buildings, two dwellings, and a carport and an accessory structure as of right now. These are some of the photos of the adjacent properties. Crockett National Bank is to the west, and this is looking down east. As you go east and southeast, you've got predominantly residential areas. As you go north, you've got the Girl Scouts building, and west is Crockett. So it's kind of in the transition between commercial and residential. So this is the 305 building that's for the short-term rental. This is looking from the back. This is 309, the existing dwelling. This is the accessory structure at the rear, and that's the carport for the two parking spots. So staff is recommending approval based on the following. We believe that the impacts on the neighborhood would be minimized based on the short-term rental locating within the existing residential building, so there won't be any visual impacts from the outside. There's fencing along the southwest and a portion of the east property line, buffer from the residence to the south. We believe it's consistent with the zoning ordinance, what the applicants are proposing. It complies with all the zoning provisions. The only exception is that second dwelling. As long as those two dwellings were previously built in the 50s, we're fine. By converting it into a short-term rental, that second dwelling will need 2 parking spaces. So we're going to recommend a condition of approval that they pave those additional spaces on the property. Compatibility with the surrounding area, as mentioned, it provides an effective transition, we believe, from the commercial uses to the east and the residential uses on the other side. The other thing to note is it's very close to the Concha River, so you've got Kids Kingdom and a lot of amenities there if someone was renting this out. No effects anticipated on the natural environment. One of the requirements for approval will be a change of occupancy. We can look at the parking if they're adding any grading or drainage through that process. As mentioned, we do believe there's a community need given it's so close to Santa Fe Park and Kids Kingdom in downtown. And finally, development patterns. No anticipated effects on the development. It's very close to South Coningheim Street, a major arterial street. 10 notices were mailed out. We've not received any back in favor or in opposition at this point. Staff recommendation is to approve short-term rental in the 2-family residential RS2 district, subject to the following 6 conditions of approval. I'd be happy to read those into the record.
I think we're good. Thank you. Do y'all have any questions y'all can think of? Okay, we're going to do public comment, but let's remember this is short-term rental. It's already been approved. We're not approving whether or not we can do short-term rentals in San Angelo. That boat has sailed, okay? This is whether or not this property is appropriate, that where this area is, that it's appropriate for short-term rentals. So just remember that when your public comments, please. All right, we have any public comment? Yes.
I don't think I have
To
enough
Jeff.
for everybody, but
Yeah, Jeff will help you.
No, you're good.
I've got one more for you.
Oh, okay, no, I'm good.
That should do all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You can go ahead and get started, Randall. Just state your name and everything.
Okay. Randall Scotty. In looking at pages 76 through 92 and looking at the application and going back to what the new ordinance calls for, and we talked about this. At least I don't know if we got into it with you guys, but in the final draft with the city council, it was part of the ordinance. John James and I had a conversation about a month ago prior to the last planning commission meeting, and that is you have one rental per property. In other words, you can have a long-term rental and a short-term rental on the same property. We talked about those in relationship to mother-in-law suites, garage apartments. Because short-term rentals are taxed at a different rate, we decided that wasn't going to work. So it's either all short-term rental or it's all long-term rental. Now, in addition to that, you can look at the back few pages here under my notes. I went to the Tom Green County Tax Appraisal District site, and I can find no record of 305 West Avenue A. 305 West Avenue A is consumed and described, if you will, under 309 West Avenue A. So I don't know how we can even have an application under that address because it doesn't appear to exist. I offer those documents I printed off this morning just to back up what I'm telling you. You can read those. The descriptions are in there very clearly for the address at 309. It includes part of Lot 6, all of Lot 7, and all of Lot 8. And if you look at what staff has provided you guys in pages 76 through 92, you will see that I don't see how there's any possible way that they can go in and replat it. The way that the old lot lines are drawn, they actually run over the top of other buildings, which I assume is why those 2.5 lots got put together as 309 West Avenue A.
Sir, would I be able to address your question on the addressing?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a number of factors when we do street addressing. One is that it is on our GIS maps. Two, it was a lot of the electrical permits that they had obtained in the past. I had checked with our permits division. They may be here for comment. Did have that 305 registered. And third, the city and the state portion of the hotel tax was registered as 305. So for those three tests and the fact that it's in our addressing system. I understand, though, it may be something we can follow up on later with the appraisal district as to why that address isn't showing up, but it does appear in our records, just to clarify.
Okay. Part of what you said doesn't meet the standard of a test on whether or not there's actually a 305. We can get into, and I'd love to see the other information that you just spoke about, and I appreciate that. But getting back to what they want to do on the property about renting part of it as long-term and part of it as short-term, they're going to have to make a choice.
Okay, we'll discuss that with John James when you get done.
Okay. And in addition to Jeff, by the way, again, going back to the address thing and the way this works, since there's no clear property lines for 305, I don't see any way that the appraisal district can go in and assess the taxes for the STR.
Okay, I think John's going to discuss that too.
Okay. Also, I'd like to bring up that the ST ordinance does not allow any permanent signage in the residence, and that's being proposed, and that in itself is enough that should this pass that I would appeal. I just don't think that we need to have signs, permanent signs in our residential neighborhoods. There is an additional location which I've attached. I pulled it down off of the website and off of the Tom Green County Appraisal District site is 102 West Avenue B. That's also part of Concho Quarters. Something happened on October 11th, 2017 regarding these two properties, 309A and this 102B. I don't know if maybe they formed an LLC, but something happened according to the appraisal district, and that is noted on there.
That's fine. I don't think 102 has anything to do with this one. I think it's just the 305.
I didn't know if maybe they
Yeah.
were using that as a short-term rental also.
Maybe, who knows? Yeah.
Okay, and the rest of this I offer for the record to be added to the record. And there's one other issue that going forward that I want to touch on, and John James has mentioned before that staff has received a legal opinion that it is illegal not to allow a conditional use permit to transfer, sale, or convey with the property. I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to ask that the city council perhaps address this and get a third-party opinion. I'll read from just briefly one little bitty sentence from an ordinance in Austin, Texas, which, by the way, does away with short-term rentals in 2022. It says, a license issued under this section may not be transferred by the property owner listed on the application and does not convey with the sale or transfer of the property. So that's been standing in our state capitol for years. So if it's illegal, someone's going to need to show that to us.
We'll discuss that too.
Okay.
We got a lot to discuss.
If you have any questions other than I offer all of these documents into the record, I'd be happy to address them if I
Any
could.
questions for Randall? No. No, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more public comment before we go to John? Is that, okay. Can I ask if the applicant's here? Sure. Is the applicant here? Do you want to talk?
Actually, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
I'm just applying for
Come say your name, just in case we have any questions. How about that?
That's fine. My name is Frank Francis. My wife and I own Contra Quarters.
Okay.
We're just applying for a vacation rental permit,
Okay.
okay? Which is a simple little deal here. I don't know what Randall has a problem with.
Do I have any questions for him?
No.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
All right, John.
Okay. I'll try to hopefully address all those.
Okay.
Let me address that last one first. I think what was determined when this was discussed at City Council in terms of whether or not it can be transferred to a new owner, that was actually discussed. The decision at that time was made that because these permits have to be renewed, even if it's transferred to a new owner, that permit expires in either 1 or 2 years, depending on whether it's the first permit or subsequent permits. And so the council believed that that was enough of a check on the process that transferring it did not require a new
Okay, so it's
renewal
not
by the
it's
new
not a
owner.
legal issue. You're not saying it has to transfer. You're saying it can transfer.
Well, I think there are two different issues. One is the conditional use approval itself. I think that's what our legal staff has made the determination. That runs with the property as a zoning type issue.
Okay.
And can be conveyed.
And can be conveyed.
Yeah.
The issuance of the permit itself, not the conditional use, but the permit, that can be limited to that individual property owner. But again, we made the decision not to treat it that way under this ordinance because the permit expires at the end of a year or 2 years.
So I think what was in question was the legality of it. Did it have to transfer, or the city has just decided it can transfer?
If we included that element in the ordinance, we could make it void once the property is transferred, but that was not written into the ordinance.
Okay.
But yes,
That way we make sure
council could make the decision to do that.
Good. So
Sim-
that way we're not saying that it's against, the law is saying that, because that's what he's questioning, is that Austin has said it doesn't. So we're San Angelo has chosen to say
Yeah.
it has. So I think that's the question.
That's a city ruling. And with our properties, when we do a conditional use on that property, it stays with the property.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes.
Regarding signage, I admit there was some confusion when this went through City Council. I know one of the presentations I made to City Council indicated that no signage would be allowed. Subsequently, or ultimately, the ordinance was not written that way. It does currently allow signage. What we've done as a condition is recommend in this case, and probably what we'll recommend in all cases, is that they only be allowed the same signage a bed and breakfast would have, which is one sign, non-illuminated, no bigger than 6 square feet. If that's a concern to you, if you would prefer these not to have signage, you could make that a condition of approval that no signage be allowed.
I think
But-
there's certain neighborhoods that again, if you're getting into a neighborhood, I'm assuming the neighbors would not want a sign.
Yep.
And I don't think the short-term rentals have to have the sign. It's not like people are gonna be driving down the street to find a short-term rental. They're gonna get it some other way, I would assume.
Well, I've made no qualms about it. I use STRs all the time, and I've stayed in some that have signs, and I've stayed in many that didn't. And I can assure you, you can find them, right? And we all know how I feel about signs anyway. But they are very simple to find a property that's got an address, right? And I don't think that I don't think an STR is an impulse buy, right? So I don't see how any of them are going to need a sign. And that's coming from me being up here, and that's also me being a consumer, right? A sign is never going to deter me or help me to use a particular STR over another, right? I mean, I don't feel like they're needed. I think we should have done a better job. We should have done a better job on that. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents, and I'm sure I'll get change back, but I just don't think they're necessary.
And let me address, I think, the third issue, and if I missed something, let me know, regarding the one, when he's correct when he says that an entire dwelling must be used as a short-term rental. The difference here is that this is RS2 zoning, which allows multiple dwellings on a lot. And so if this were single-family zoning, then yes, they could only have one dwelling and one short-term rental on the property. But because this is RS2 zoning, it allows 2 dwellings. And in this case, both of those could be used as a short-term rental, or one is a short-term rental, one is a long-term rental or owner-occupied. But the difference here, again, is that zoning allows multiple dwellings. Similarly, in an apartment zoning, multiple apartments could be used as short-term rentals, even on one
It's
single
the fact it's
property.
not in a single family.
Correct.
RS2.
That's
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
the
and I
distinction
know
here.
on that street, since I'm at Crockett, that street has duplexes up and down it.
Right. But if this were single-family zoning,
Then we would have an
then that would
issue.
be correct.
Okay.
They could only have the one.
Very good. Do you want to say something about the address?
I wanted to ask about that because I have seen that in some others that I've looked up that I've stayed at, that they don't even exist on the tax rolls in particular counties, and I was wondering why that happens.
And as Jeff answered, our records show this, having the addresses as you see here on the screen. The appraisal district may keep their records differently.
knows,
In some cases, when you can see this is actually 2.5 lots. When an owner asks that those all be considered as one property record, even though in our records they're separately addressed properties, the appraisal district may assign one address to the whole group of lots in terms of how they keep it in their records.
Without an A, B, and C?
Right. It could be A, B, and C. It could be 309, 305. But what we take as official is our official addressing records that are kept in the city. The appraisal district records are for their purposes in terms of tax appraisals and taxes, not what is officially addressed on the property, which, again, as Jeff indicated, our records do have individual addresses. Having said all of that, I don't think that's important in terms of whether or not those can be considered 2 separate dwellings. That's a completely
Right.
different issue.
No, I think it was just more confusing than anything else. The fact that you couldn't look it up on the tax roll. I think that was the thing, I think it was just confusing. All right. Does that answer all of John's questions that everybody had? Okay, and I want to just clarify, this house was already used as a short-term rental and it was already paying taxes?
Yes, it was one of those, I think there were 8 in the city that were grandfathered because they had been operating and also had been paying both state and local.
They've been operating the
Hotel
entire time
taxes.
legally. They were doing things correctly.
That they thought was legal.
Well, this is still,
But before we figured it out.
still
Okay.
did it.
Yeah.
Still trying.
Yeah, yeah, and let me say, because I'm next door, is y'all have done some good improvements to that property. I mean, it really looks nice. That whole street is looking a lot better as far as people are really taking what you've done and kind of cleaned it up all the way down the street. So kudos to y'all for that.
Yeah.
All right, do y'all have more questions? Do we have more public comment? I'm sorry. We got off on John? Yes, sir. Come back up and state your name.
Randall Scotty.
Yep.
Somebody's going to have to help me here, but at no time do I recall or was I involved in any conversations where we talked about dwellings being apartments. No time. So when we were talking about the entire dwelling and with this conversation that I've had before, it didn't matter how many structures were on it. In other words, it didn't matter if it was RS1, 2, or 3. It either had to all be short-term rental or all be long-term rental. You weren't even allowed to live on the property and rent one of the structures as a short-term rental. All of this was discussed at the city council level, so
And
again.
yeah, and let's ask John that, and it may be too, Randall. This is really new to all of us and to you too. It's new to everybody.
Yes, it is.
That I think we're educating ourselves as each one comes up. I mean, so it is. I think we're still in a learning curve on what can and can't be done. So thank you very much.
The short answer to that is almost exclusively the discussions at City Council dealt with the concerns of single-family neighborhoods. And so this issue wasn't discussed one way or the other. All along, the drafts of the ordinance allowed only, one short-term rental per dwelling. It really was never discussed.
Never got into duplexes or quadruplexes or any of those. Okay.
And so I can't know if council intended that or not. That's the way the draft of the ordinance was always written to include. You could have multiple short-term rentals on a property that allowed multiple dwellings. But all of the discussion at council had to do with single-family residences. And for that, that's correct. You couldn't live in a guest house and then rent the main house.
And I think this is the first one we've seen. We've not talked about a 2-unit or 3-unit. We've only talked about a 1-unit. So I think it may be that it just has not came up.
Well, we did talk about it though, and that's why I'm bringing it up again.
Yeah, we did not talk about it
Right,
here.
that's correct. It wasn't talked about at the planning commission level. But you can see from a regulatory and a code enforcement standpoint, not to put aside the tax issues for the appraisal district, what a regulatory nightmare that this would be. And that's why we decided that, it only can be one or the other. And we weren't going to have people that were living on the property and renting out the garage thing as a short term, so on and so forth.
And you
So I
couldn't
can understand.
Yeah, you couldn't have a house and like a mother-in-law suite that's all one house and then rent out the mother-in-law short term and then keep the house. But if it is actually a duplex or a quadruplex or a triplex or whatever, then you could. That's what I'm understanding. Is that right?
Based on zoning.
That's correct. And again,
Based on zoning.
from
Based
my
on zoning,
recollection,
that's right.
every time this was discussed at the council, it was in the context of a single-family neighborhood where
Okay.
there is only one dwelling allowed
Right.
per site, per property.
And
We may end up having
So that may be
to
something you need
appeal
to go
this
back and,
just to
yeah.
get it
Yeah.
all straightened out.
Yeah, and you need to do whatever, I mean, like I said, this is a learning experience for all of us, and what we're trying to do is just make sure each one is appropriate, it's good for the area, that kind of stuff. So last month it wasn't, this month it looks better.
I'm with you 100%. My intention was to not get into a position where we're setting a bad precedent right out of the box.
Right.
So, again, should I have to appeal this, please don't anybody get their feelings hurt.
Oh, no,
This
it's
is just to
business,
try to
yeah.
get the record straight
Right.
going
It's business.
forward. I understand we
Right.
have an ordinance, and if I was sitting in your shoes and this thing was all nice and clean, we didn't have all these property lines running over other houses, nobody objected, I would vote to give them the permit. Even though I'm not a fan of short-term rentals, I would do what was
Right.
called for
Appropriate.
under the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other public comment? All right, there being none, do I have a motion?
I'd like to just go back to what Joe was talking about with signage. I tend to agree with Joe that signage for these isn't necessary, and
We can actually state that?
You could amend that particular condition to, instead of saying no evidence of a short-term rental should be allowed except for one illuminated sign, no larger than 6 square feet, you could say no exterior evidence of short-term rental should be allowed, period.
I like that
Okay,
better.
so I'm going to make a
Because if it's in a
motion.
neighborhood, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to make a motion to approve, subject to no signage.
I'll second.
okay, so we have Travis made the motion and Mark seconded it. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Very good. And thank you, Randall, for educating us. Okay, going down to BCU 1715, Castellanos. Castellanos. I'm sure I butchered that.
Planning Commissioners, conditional use 1715 Castellanos, 3 acres. It's east of North Bryant Boulevard, south of Lake Drive, SMD number 2, Tom Thompson's district, Riverside neighborhood. So the future land use on this property is commercial, and the zoning is light manufacturing ML. This is the site plan of what they're proposing. So basically, their request today, and some of you that were here in 2016 may remember this, about 3 properties to the south, the applicant had a similar request to allow hay sales, a subsidiary of retail sales and service, in the ML light manufacturing zone, which is not allowed without a conditional use. They also wanted to park an RV for household living. The owner's family, we understand, has that business and wanted to have an accommodation there. Condition of approval at the time was to approve the hay sales on that other property, but to remove the RV. Due to the way the ordinance is written, technically, you can't have an RV as household living, even by conditional use, but you can have a manufactured home. So on this new property today, if you approve this, it'd be for 2 items. Retail sale of hay and agricultural related products, and 2, to allow a manufactured home, which would be allowed if you decide to by conditional use. So this is the site plan that the applicant has provided. You can see the hay barrels there. There's an existing about 225 square foot office that they'd be using as well, North Bryant Boulevard. There we go. So looking north, there's portable homes for sale. So that's a retail commercial component. As you go south, there's also a vehicle repair garage. So there's some commercial uses already, even though the zoning is ML. The long-term comprehensive plan is commercial, so it is trending that way, we believe, over time. And this is east at the property. They also have a goat pen area at the back. They'll need to verify that it's their personal goats, and then they're allowed to do that. I believe it's the same goats that we saw on the other property a couple of years back, so that'll just be a condition of approval. Staff is recommending approval based on the following. We believe the property is surrounded by other commercial uses, so there's no anticipated adverse impacts in this case. It's basically hay barrels and a manufactured home at the back. 2, we believe it's consistent with the zoning ordinance, complies with all the zoning provisions. As a condition of approval, the dirt and collegiate parking area will have to be paved with 2 parking spaces and a paved connection to the street. So however they decide to do that, 9 by 18 each space, one of them will have to be wheelchair accessible. 3, we believe it's compatible with the surrounding area. It's located along a commercial corridor. The manufactured home, that's an interesting situation. Normally in a light industrial, light manufacturing zone, we wouldn't allow housing. This is a very unique situation where we're imposing a condition. It's only limited to the owner or the people that are part of that business. Self-service storage, that definition in the zoning ordinance does allow a dwelling or a residential quarters for security, and we believe that's what they're doing. It's just for security, and as long as it's related to the business owners, the only ones using it, and they're not selling it out as a separate rental, we believe that would be consistent just in this case. No anticipated effects on the natural environment. The applicant provides hay to local farmers, ranchers, and the local community, so we do believe there's a community need. And no development patterns should be affected. They're using the existing office. They're piling hay there. It's off of Bryant Boulevard. It's a large arterial road, so we don't anticipate any traffic concerns. 6 notices were mailed. We did not receive any responses at this time. Staff recommendation is to approve the request to allow retail sales and service, the sale of agricultural produce, and to household living, in this case a manufactured home, in the light manufacturing ML zoning district subject to the 8 conditions of approval. I'd be happy to read those in.
No, I think we're okay. I have a question, though. Okay, so you're saying the manufactured home, because again, it's not zoned for manufactured homes, you're saying that that is only specifically for them? And then if they sell this property, that is not allowed because it's a conditional use?
Well, it could be, but if they were to sell it, the new business owner would have to be running a business on the property. So in other words, they couldn't sell it to a separate.
Just live in a mobile home?
That's
there.
right.
Okay, so it has to be for security or whatever?
For the business on the property. So as long as it stays agriculture and hay sales, and if they were to flip it 2 years down the road, another family was to run the exact same business, they could also use it. They just couldn't rent it out separately.
Okay.
Just for clarification, if they sold the property, a new buyer comes in, and they decide not to run a commercial business there, then the manufactured home would have to go away as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Because again, we did all that for manufactured homes, that you had to be zoned and everything, and then now we're putting them in a different zoning, so. I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know. I assume they already have electricity and sewage
Yeah,
and everything
I'm not trying to
there.
get too technical, but, so, I mean, I get it,
Is it connected to city
yeah, I mean,
services?
is it city sewer and, I mean, all that kind of, I mean, what's,
I believe so. I know there's a water and an electrical hookup, for sure. I'm not sure if there's a sewer hookup, but I do know that they can connect to services, and they limited that obviously to that 1 meter. They don't continue to add meters.
So you couldn't put a
And as-
manufactured house there without having septic or sewer?
You're right. In order to meet number 2, obtaining the permits for a manufactured home, it's going to have to meet all of the standards
Okay.
that any manufactured home would have to meet, including connection to city services.
Okay.
And let me, while I'm talking, let me add one more thing. We had discussed with this, and just talking here with legal, I think we would change condition number 1 to just say limited to 1 manufactured home. I think upon further discussion, limiting it to 4 persons, we don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So that would be our recommendation.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Public comment? Any public comment?
I do have a quick question. I'm sorry
Okay.
to jump back. Can you go back to the picture with the goats and explain why there are goats?
My understanding is, I was
That's good
expecting,
because you're in late.
I was expecting the applicant today, so they may be later tied up, but from what I understand from them, they had these goats for their family, because they're farmers and ranchers, and so they had these on the separate property, and they were able to verify at the time that had they have stayed, that they were for personal enjoyment. Under our zoning ordinance, you can have animals subject to the animal control. I think it's 100 feet or 200 feet back from an adjacent property.
In this
or home.
zoning?
Correct. As long as it's for personal use and enjoyment, you can have it in any zoning. You can have goats.
And in our area out there, we got goats, we got horses, we got pigs, we got everything. We got
Yes.
chickens. I mean, so as long as it's personal use and they're not like running a business of the goats.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What can you say? Okay. Any other questions? No. All right.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Sammy made the motion. Joe seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm opposed.
You're opposed?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't, I'm sorry.
Sorry, 5-1.
Yeah. This is a commercial corridor and a gateway for our community, and I'm okay with the hay sales, but allowing a manufactured home on that lot to me just doesn't make sense. And it's commercial. I would personally like to see commercial for businesses and not for allowing people to reside on the property as well. So that's why I'm opposed.
Okay, we're to CU 1716 Thompson.
I'm sorry, ma'am, before we move forward, I just wanted to make sure that the motion and the second included rewording condition of
Yes.
approval. Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify for the record.
Yes, thank you.
Finish reading that into the record for the next one?
CU 1716 Thompson. Yeah.
Okay, Jeff Fisher, Senior Planner with the City of San Angelo. This is another conditional use today on 0.115 acres north of West Beauregard Avenue, east of South Jefferson Street in Lane Carter's District Number 5 in the central neighborhood. So this is an existing CGCH zoned commercial property. It's been commercial for as long as we can remember. The owner had come in for an electrical permit several months back, and it was flagged at the time that he had gradually been converting the north half of the building in the back here into a residential living space. And so he needs a conditional use for that in the CGCH district. My understanding from, just to clarify the record on the staff report, he'd been doing all of that according to him and his family before 1999. And so, but had he have gotten a permit before 2000, he probably would have been grandfathered in. Unfortunately, he waited too long, and so we're here today. So just to clarify that. The future land use is neighborhood center, and the zoning, as I mentioned, is CGCH. So the existing residential area in the yellow on the screen is approximately 42% of the overall building. He's got 2 vacant commercial units in the front that face Beauregard. If you know where Sunshades is downtown, just west of downtown, that's where this is immediately next door. You've got residential to the north as soon as you go north, and then as soon as you start on the south end, it's commercial. So we've looked at kind of both parts of the unit. There is a carport in the back. If he paves an additional 8 feet and removes this purple, it's noted in purple here, this privacy internal fence, he adds another 8 feet, he will comply with the zoning for parking. So we'll make that a condition of approval if you all approve it, and he'll get the 2 parking spaces he needs. If he goes to develop these vacant commercial units, he will have an issue down the road. We don't want to stop them from getting the residential approved today, but he will have to provide parking, find an alternative parking agreement within 400 feet, or apply for a variance on the if the commercial units develop. Again, just to clarify. So these are the photos looking west and east. So it's predominantly commercial. This is south at Catfish Corner, and this is north of the property. So this is going inside. Residential unit has already been developed with a stove and oven, and this is the rear carport here. So that little fence in there would have to be removed, and you can get another 8 feet and get the parking back there. These are the 2 commercial units in the front. There are, as he said, as you go north of Beauregard, it becomes more residential in nature, as well as RS1, RS2 zoning. So this is an apartment building immediately west at 18 South Jefferson, and these are the residential dwellings as well to the east. So staff's rationale is to recommend approval. We believe that the impacts are minimized in that the residential unit is already in the unit. There's no expansion at all. We want to put a condition that limits it to the existing area. We don't want to have families, you know, in the front half and kids running out onto the street, so just keep it where it is in the back. We believe it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. The buildings were grandfathered in, so they don't have to meet the setbacks. The 2 parking spaces under the carport, once they add that 8 feet, they will comply with all the zoning. We believe it's compatible with the surrounding area. Again, it's a commercial at the front, residential at the back. No anticipated effects on the natural environment. The carport area is already paved. We believe there's a community need in this area, neighborhood center. It does call, in some cases, on a case-by-case basis, we believe this is one of them, for a mix of different uses. There are cases where residential units are appropriate in commercial zones. It's very right along the public transit line for Concho Valley, so we believe this is appropriate in this case. And finally, development patterns. It's a fully built-out property, so no anticipated effects on the traffic network. 18 notifications were mailed out, and we haven't received any responses to date. Staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use to allow for household living in the general commercial, heavy commercial CGCH zoning, subject to 3 conditions of approval. I'm happy to read those in the record if you'd like.
Good. Any questions? Okay. Public comment.
Tommy Thompson. I'm the son of the owner of this building, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions?
Nope.
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, there being none, do I have a motion?
Make the motion to approve.
Mark made the motion?
Second.
Sammy seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 6-0. All right, right-of-way vacations and abandonment. City Council has final authority for approval of the vacation and abandoning of public right-of-way. Street right-of-way vacation and abandonment of a portion of North Cellar Street, Givens.
Good morning, Hillary Bucher again. This is 0.17 acres. It's about 125 feet long, a portion of North Cellars. It's between Bel Air Avenue and the alley to the north. It's in SMD 3 Harry Thomas in the Glenmore neighborhood. So you can see it's just a small portion. They've shown it here as two, once it's abandoned, could be sold off to each adjacent neighbor. The neighbor to, on your screen, the right, is the one requesting it, so that's what we're moving forward with. The future land use in this whole area is neighborhood. If you can see to the north, you'll see the home addresses. This was originally thought to go through at some point and never did. So right now it just sits as a vacant piece of land with no street improvements. You'll see here they're actually doing construction on the house to the right, but you can see there's some trucks and stuff, but there's no improved surface if you see the picture on the right. And this is the photo looking south on North Cellar Street. So there's good connectivity in this area. We don't think this will adversely affect any of the traffic patterns. It acts as actually a side yard for both homes, so there's no street improvements. The northern land was platted in '83 and the road was never used for a connection. It provides no public benefit and removes any additional expense for the city of having to upgrade it in the future. We mailed out 28 notifications and we've received 0 in favor and 0 in opposition. So staff recommends approval of the 0.17 acre segment of North Cellar Street public right-of-way abandonment, subject to 2 conditions of approval. They have to plat the property into absorbing the subject property into the adjacent lots and then remit the payment for the assessed formula outlined in the fee schedule if it's approved.
Any questions? Any public comment? There being none. Have a motion? Terry made the motion. Mark seconded it. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Discussion items. Discussion of regarding right-of-way standards and the criteria for approval of variances as delineated in the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. I just wanted to mention a couple things that are upcoming. You may have seen that in the council meetings, they've discussed variances to subdivision requirements, street paving, right-of-way, et cetera. They've expressed some concern that waiving the number of variances we have over the past like 20 years, that has created some issues long-term, and so they want us to look at the practices and policies that related to those variances, and perhaps kind of a twofold approach is what we're going to be presenting them, and it'll come to you all as well. One is to look at the subdivision ordinance, and this may have been something I've mentioned before, but we want to look at creating a minimum standard that would apply to existing streets. So our standards in our ordinance today are basically for when you go out and build a brand new street, this is what we want it to look like. Mm-hmm. This pavement width, this right-of-way width, and many of the variances that you all approve are for existing situations where a street's been substandard, but it's been that way for 40 years, it works fine, and so we all look at it and say, you know what, it's silly to make them expand the street. But I think that has gotten rolled up in some others that I think we, at least from a staff perspective, we think perhaps those variances shouldn't be granted. And so what we're looking at is creating a minimum standard for those existing streets that's less than the standard for brand new streets. And we think that will resolve quite a few of the variance requests. So in other words, you won't be seeing variance requests as much because hopefully we'll address that. And one of the things that we're looking at as we draft that provision is looking at using our GIS of all the streets in the city and trying to set that standard that's reasonable. It ensures an adequate width of a street for functionality, but also looks at the streets that are out there. You know, what percentage of the streets are built at a certain width, and factoring that into the equation as well. The other thing that we're looking at, and it may be relevant to a couple of the plats you looked at today, those Red Creek plats, we are in discussions with the county to amend our ETJ agreement and basically with them decide, okay, what areas do we think the city is reasonably going to grow into in the next 20, 30 years. I think sometimes people come to you and say, hey, we shouldn't worry about building it to city standards because that's not going to be annexed anytime soon. Our caution to you is, well, yeah, that may not happen in the next 5 years, but we're looking 20, 30, 40 years out. But even looking 30, 40 years out, we know there are some areas that probably aren't going to be annexed. And so we're looking at amending that ETJ agreement to say for areas possibly like Red Creek, okay, county, you deal with that. You take on the subdivision review. Those won't even come to the city. Other areas that are closer in that the city might need to grow into, we'll continue to review and approve those. So those are a couple of changes that you'll be seeing soon. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up so that you're thinking in the back of your mind when those come to you, maybe you have given it some thought. So that's all I had.
Anything on your
unless you have any
director's report?
questions. Just one thing, we are in talking with the DHRC, looking at changes to the river corridor. They're going to be looking at those over the next month or two, but that should be coming to you all at the first of the year. Some simplification of the river corridor standards and as well as looking at the boundaries of where the river corridor and downtown guidelines apply. And so, again, what we've been asked to do is look at the boundaries and also look at simplifying that process and making it more understandable to business owners and property owners in those areas. So, again, that'll be coming to you.
Great.
Oh, yeah. Well, two more things. One, I just wanted to mention you're about to announce that the next meeting is December 11th. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the January meeting would normally be the 15th, but because of the MLK holiday, that'll be pushed back a week to January 22nd. Also, I want to introduce Aaron Vanoy. He is our new development administrator. If you remember A.J. Favre, who was in that position for a long time, she moved on to become the planning director in Amarillo. Aaron is the replacement for that position, and we're happy to have him on board, and I'm sure
Welcome.
you'll be seeing more of him.
I'll vouch that he's a good guy. I like that guy.
That's all I had.
I'd just like to say that I'm excited about y'all revisiting the street variances. I mean, that's something that's always confusing to us, and I have a really hard time with seeing an hourglass type of road coming in on our existing streets, so hopefully this will find some common ground that's much more workable. I appreciate that.
And now that you mention that, let me add one thing that I meant to say that I didn't. One of the things we're looking at for the revision to the ordinance is a deferral, because we understand that making one property owner widen 100 feet of street right in front of their property doesn't make sense. But in some cases, it also doesn't make sense to completely waive that obligation. And so what a deferral would allow us to do is keep that obligation on that property owner, but don't make them do it today. Someday, 15 years from now, when the city comes in to widen the road, they would then have to pay their share of that little piece of the road.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Let me ask you another question. I understand if you revisit it and you decide that the minimum standard for a new subdivision is 60 feet, and right now there's a 30-foot road there, and they're just wanting to add on to there, not a new subdivision, and you say, okay, we're going to lower that to 40 or 50, whatever, for that situation, then does the public still have the right to ask for a variance from that?
Yes, the variance will still be an option.
I mean, say it's 30 feet this way. Yeah, I know you've rewritten it and you said it needs to be 40, but we'd like to keep it 30. They have a right to do that, to apply for variance.
Yes, the variance process would still, well, I should say.
You're just trying to simplify it.
We're not, yeah, we're not intending to recommend getting rid of variances. Now, council could decide to do that. I don't think they will. But no, our recommendation would still be to allow the variance process.
Didn't we recently change where the ones like outside the city that we have said something about the streets that we okayed it? That now is going to the city council and they get the final approval because of the cost of the streets if they take them over? Wasn't there something, did I dream that up? Because we had a couple, I may have dreamed it up. We had a couple of situations where that we okayed the streets being what was considered subpar. Okay, but
Yeah, I think so.
remember that?
We did change the ordinance to allow staff to appeal, like right
Okay,
now.
that's it. Okay.
If you deny it, the applicant can appeal it to council. Now we have the ability, if you approve it, we can appeal that to get a council to
Okay, to
consider
look at it. Okay, very good. I was gonna say, I dreamed of that. Okay, all right. It is 10:11. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Terry made
Second.
the motion. Mark seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Somebody seconded it down there.